Hello, I am Peter Houten from the Classics and Archaeology department here at University of Nottingham. Today I will present on the use of Geographic Information Systems in the arts, or GIS in the arts. The obvious use for a GIS is creating maps for research. The simplest approach is drawing, for instance, the maps on the slide. Let's have a closer look at these two maps. I have created these for the Latinau European Touring Exhibition. Last year we visited museums in the area which is shown on these maps, something which is not possible in the current day situation. However, our research within Latinization of the northwestern provinces of the Roman Empire looks at how the spread of Latin changed the linguistic situation. So to the left we see a map of the Roman West before the conquest and all the languages spoken, at least we know of. And to the right we see the situation of the same area with the linguistic situation roughly the 6th century current era. Obviously the maps transfer a very strong message. The difference between the two maps is striking. The red color of Latin creates an image of a large monolingual and homogeneous linguistic area. Moreover, the extent of the different languages could be taken as a certainty. This is exactly the problem of maps like these. The linguistic situation would not have been that unified and simple. Moreover, the boundaries are not as clear as shown on these maps. People tend to move around and speak multiple languages. And then this is just a bit of academic doodling. What happens if you start using GIS properly? Now, first, you have to be certain what GIS is. Esri, the main GIS application provider, defines it as follows. The Geographic Information System is a framework for gathering, managing, and analyzing data. Rooted in the science of geography, GIS integrates many types of data. It analyzes spatial location and organizes layers of information into visualizations, using maps and 3D scenes. With this unique capability, GIS reveals deeper insights into data, such as patterns, relationships, and situations, helping users to make smarter decisions. As you can see from this definition, it's a bit more than simple doodling on a map. As Esri has defined, we can do slightly more with it. The mapping we could use it for is only 1 out of 5 options we have. So spatial data visualization has its digital cartography, that's the map making. However, data acquisition is the creation of new data by, for instance, digitizing maps or parts of maps we already have, and then we can add our own research to those existing maps. However, beyond mapping elements, we can do much more with GIS. First, we can manage our data in a database management system. So we can collect our data in a GIS database, add rows and fields, and create or change attributes. We can also upload Excel sheets as comma delimited files. Moreover, we can add and work with spatial elements of our data, spatial data management, transform data sets and different coordinate systems to one system for mapping and then analysis. Which brings us to the last, the spatial data analysis. This is obviously the real strength of a GIS approach. When we have a data set in a GIS, we can start analyzing the relations between the different attributes. We can query, for instance, by location. So if we have specific regions, we can ask what is within the region and then compare different regions for their attributes. As you can see, there is a multitude of analysis we can do using spatial data we have created. But we need programs or applications to work with our spatial data. So long story short, Geographic Information System really comes down to just 4 simple ideas. Create geographic data, manage it, analyze it, display it on a map. And these are the primordial functions of GIS. But for that, we need the different programs. So here we see a non-exhaustive list of GIS programs which allow for the analysis of data. So most commonly used are the two on the left, ArcGIS and QGIS. And the main difference between these two is licensing. For ArcGIS, a license is needed. Now, as a student or university researcher, you often have a license through your institution. Individual licenses are a possibility and can cost from a few hundred up to several thousand of pounds. And that's the massive downside of ArcGIS. But this has, obviously, advantages. You pay for a program with many options, more than QGIS has. In addition, you will receive support from the S3 company if needed. And ArcGIS is a finished product, you're buying it. When you buy it, it's very stable. QGIS, on the other hand, can have bugs and just crash on you. So it's important to save your progress, your project, when you're working on it. But it's a free open source program. And as it is open source and there is a large online community working with it, there is continuous development and new possibilities or applications within ArcGIS are soon integrated into QGIS. So every 2 months there's a new version released, and the long-term release is more stable than the latest versions. So that long-term release is sort of a finished product. Obviously, the choice is up to you. If you have access to ArcGIS and you know you will keep this access, ArcGIS is the wise choice. However, if you get the hang of spatial analysis and you change institution or find yourself without an institution, QGIS is the best option. You will always be able to use QGIS. Now you might think, wait a minute, where is Google Maps in this story? Well, indeed, we could just simply use Google Maps to create a map. And obviously, if you're only interested in showing dots on a map, this is the simplest option, as is shown here. By just dropping pins on a map, you can show specific whatever you want. And you can even, as I show here, use different pins to show different things you want to show. So this is my own Google Maps, and I've been doing this for quite a while, as I like doing stuff like this. So the yellow pins are places I visited, the red one is where I lived, and blue is I want to visit. Well, the Iberian Peninsula is quite full because that's my research area, so I've been there quite a bit. But it shows how you can use the pins and color them, and you can easily make a map if you just want to show places. But GIS is more than just showing places. We don't want to use GIS just because we want to use GIS. But if we have spatial data, it is something we can consider. Why would I use GIS? But first of all, first question is my data spatial? The very moment you're looking at data with places or locations added, you have a spatial component. And this is more frequent than you think. For instance, if you're taking interviews, you might have collected the place where the interview is taken or the place where the interviewed person is coming from. So this is spatial data, and this could be related to what you are doing with, for your research. So the next question you have to ask yourself when you have spatial data is, how useful is my data? Has it been collected in a similar manner? So I'm talking about spatial data. Has been collected in a similar manner? Am I collecting places of birth, or places of residence, or places where people are? Or have these been mixed? And how are these mixed? And is it important to keep these things separate? For example, we can take a look at the data I created to indicate where participants of an online QGIS course I did last month were. So this is the data I collected. We have 40 participants, and to the left is a simple table with the number of participants per country. And that's ordered from highest to lowest. So we can see Germany, Spain, United Kingdom, United States, China. To the right, we have a graph, and immediately, of course, the difference in these numbers is visualized. A table is less good for this. So you can see in the graph, it's ordered alphabetically according to the English name, and Germany really stands out with its 14 participants, Spain with 8. So this is a very valid way of showing your data, but this data is spatial, so we can look at it from a very different angle, and that is on a map. So spatial data we have has some problems. This is at the location people gave in their application, but we're not sure its current residence or its institution address or even something else. I mean, in this current pandemic, I am not at a location I would normally be when teaching in the UK. So normally I reside in Oxford. At this very moment, I'm in Utrecht. In my application, I might actually have Nottingham and Oxford, my two institutions, but not state that I am in Utrecht. And this could well be the case with these participants. When we mapped it, we realized that we only have people from the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, looking at our data and thinking about this, it would still be possible to realize you only have people from the Northern Hemisphere. But when you map it, it's immediately clear. So this is something we could think about. Why do we have this spread? Why is it only the Northern Hemisphere? Another question is, how does our online course, how can we get more participants from different countries? For instance, China and the USA with 3 and 2 participants are actually outliers. If you see that most of our participants come from Europe. So how did these people learn about it? So these are questions we can ask ourselves when it's mapped. Now, besides the issue of the places data, there is something else which is not the best put in this map, and that is decoloring by color. For so when coloring, we have to think about the color scheme. In this case, the use of purple was chosen as the color of the institution, Toledo, for which we organized this QGIS course. So a range of one color is not the best, but it can be done, as you see. And nevertheless, this map was just for fun, but it's a good illustration of the elements we need to think of when simply mapping things. So back to our questions. So we need spatial data, and we need to consider the quality of a spatial data. But then the most important question, if we have spatial data, is, does a research question require to map things? If a research question includes a spatial component, then it's worth to go further than just using a simple map and start thinking about analysis. Less straightforward is the question whether you will be able to see things differently when you map them. This is often only seen when mapped or analyzed, as I just showed you with the simple map created from the participants. So let's dive into some other examples of mapping and the issues and questions we can ask. And finding, or better, making a map, we should make clear what we're looking at. For instance, this map will be hard for you to interpret, except if you're a hidden Dutchie in this course and understand what's going on here. So you might have realized that this is the Netherlands, and it's a map, and kaart in Dutch, that shows the chances, kansen, so that's on the top left, kansenkaart, map of chances people have when we consider income. So this map shows the chances one has compared to their parents' income based on where they're residing. So as there's no clear legend to this map, it's hard to interpret, even when knowing what it is about. However, when knowing what the blues are, when knowing that the blues are high chances to grow beyond the income of your parents, and reds are low chances to get further than your parents, we can start interpreting what's going on. So the two circles indicate the areas where people would be most successful. I mean, leaving out some other areas, but these are the clear centers where this is happening. And these are the economic centers to the west, where the historical port cities of Amsterdam, The Hague, and Rotterdam are located. Although the keen eye must have noticed that the cities themselves are not blue. They provide less chances. So that's a question we should ask ourselves. So how is it possible that these have less opportunities and the areas between the cities have more opportunities? And to the south, we find the old industrial area around Eindhoven, where we find what the Dutch have labeled the Brainport, which developed around the companies of Philips and ASML and the University of Eindhoven. The outlying north is clearly the periphery of the Netherlands. Now, this map has some more issues here. It shows the difference in income based on that of your parents. However, it looks at your current residence and not your place of birth. As a result, places left by people as they were successful turn red, and areas where people move to when they are successful turn blue. Hence, the north and the cities in the west are red. People with success tend to move to the west and prefer to live outside, but near cities. As such, the map does not show how much success people from regions have, but where successful people want to live. Now we can compare our constant gap with a map of the 2017 election of the Netherlands by overlaying this. This would be something quite easily done by QGIS, in a QGIS, and we could actually analyze the difference between these two maps, apart from what we're doing now, which is just eyeballing and seeing things. So no, we don't have a first past the post voting system. And nonetheless, the overall blue shows how well the Conservative Party did, and this led to a Conservative government supported by the Christian parties in dark green and light blue. Looking at the light blue, we can see what we call the Bible Belt with some imagination, but this makes it more clearer. It's not a clear belt, but through the country, you find a region of more conservative Christians. Now you might wonder, why are we talking about this? Well, when going back to the map with the chances, we can see how these two circles are divided by this Bible Belt. I'm not showing the circles at the same time as the belt for obvious reasons, but this is something we can only do when we look at our data spatially. If you have this in an Excel sheet, you will never notice that these two areas are cut up by a broad region, which also shows that a different political situation. And these are questions we can start asking when we have created maps and start comparing maps. And as stated, when I would have had the information from these maps in a GIS, then I will be able to actually compare the differences and analyze this and do statistics on it. Now, another way to do analysis is what is called historical GIS and then sequence mapping. By looking at sequence mapping, we can actually show the development of a region over time. So when going through the Iberian Peninsula, my own research area, around the year 200, it's the Roman Empire. Then in 500, the Roman Empire has fallen, and now we have several kingdoms. Then we see the Emirate of Cordoba, the Caliphate of Cordoba. We can see that the northern kingdoms are now slowly expanding to the south, which is labeled the Reconquista. Here we see almost the end of the Muslim habitation of the Iberian Peninsula. Portugal has started to exist. This is the Catholic monarchy. The Kingdom of Portugal and Aragon are all integrated, and here at the end we can see Portugal is independent again. So that's a sequence mapping, and we can do this, of course, with multiple things. So this is the Iberian Peninsula in 1600 years, but you can do that with, for instance, elections and see how elections have changed. I mean, you must have seen the maps for the past the last week. You have probably seen multiple maps of the election results and how these work. And most likely you also have seen the difference, I forgot to put it in this PowerPoint, between the just the states, the coloring of the states, which is a lot of red, and then the coloring by inhabitants, showing how actually less blue can become a lot more blue if we look at population and not just the states. So this incorporation of GIS into the humanities started in the 90s with the spatial turn. So at this time, people started realizing that by showing elements in maps, by looking at the spread, we can get a new perspective. Whereas in the early spatial turn, so in the 90s, specialist geographers were needed to explain to us, people in humanities and the arts, how it works, actually to do the analysis, because it was all new and very complicated and difficult. But now the applications are quite easily open source. You can easily get them. And we have gotten very used to geographic information. We all use Google Maps all the time. We know how to read maps. We know how to move around in a geographical environment. So it's so common that we can all start looking for our data for a spatial perspective. Thank you very much.